Hello, welcome to the Flutter Factory. So I want to continue a series that I'm doing to show how to build an entire app from scratch. So in the first video, I mostly discussed the UI for the home page here. So we have our home screen with a tab, videos, and docs here. And we also have the flexible space app bar here, which adds a cool effect to our home screen. So when we scroll up, it fades away and the tabs stay here. So now I want to discuss a more important topic of architecture. So how do you actually want to design the code in your app? So not only the UI design, but the code design is very, very important. So I created a design here, so a document, and it shows a layered architecture that I want to make for this app. So I'm a big fan of the clean architecture and the layered onion style of architectures that you might see in different apps throughout your career. And I wanted to kind of go over a very simple way to structure your app. So the first layer here I have is the user interface or the UI. So that will be where your stateless and stateful widgets live. And the next layer, there'll be your state management. So your change notifiers for your providers, your getX controllers for your getX, your blocks, etc. So the cool thing about having this as its own layer is that if you want to switch from provider to getX, for example, then all you would need to change is this layer and this layer. Changing different layers shouldn't affect other layers. Okay, so then we have our service layer. So this service layer is where all of your business logic will go to. Okay, and it's also where you can actually create more testable code. So if you want to write unit tests for your Flutter app, then this would be a great place to put your testable code and to actually test your logic. So the repository layer decides where the data should come from. And last is the data. So this is the most basic layer here. So this holds the information about the data itself. So if you have data coming from a database, an API, file storage, etc., this layer would control a lot of that stuff here. Okay, so first let's go back to the app, and I'm actually going to start backwards. So I'm going to create a new lib folder here, and let's call it data. And inside of here, I'm going to create a new folder, and let's call it API. So if you have a API with your app, you'll probably want to have a separate API folder. And inside of the API folder, I'm going to put a new file, and I'm going to call it client.dart. And this client file, let's make a class first. So class client. This controls the configuration of an API. And for this video, I'm actually not going to put anything inside of this class, but I wanted to create it as a reference point for later. So for this video, the data is not going to be coming from an API. So I'm going to actually go to the next layer, which is the repository layer. So let's go up here, and I'm going to create a new repository. I think I spelled that right. Okay, and inside of here, I'm going to create a new repository. So I'm going to call this video repository .dart. And then I'll say class video repository. And inside of here, I want to actually mock a like an API call that we might get from a server. So instead of creating the API stuff now, we're going to worry about that in a future video. For this app, I want to return a list of videos here in this screen here. So let's go back here, and I'm going to create a new function, and I'm going to call it fetch API, or not fetch API, but let's call it fetch all videos. So this function will be in charge of fetching the videos from a data source. At this point, we don't know what that data source is, but the video source itself doesn't matter as much as having a way to decide where to fetch it from. And we'll talk about that later too. But for now, I'm going to try and simulate an API response. So I'm going to create some artificial delay here. So I'm going to say await, and we're going to create a future future.delayed. And this is how you create a delay in your app. So we're going to say duration seconds, and let's wait maybe 5 seconds. Okay, and this needs to be async. So let's do async. And now down here, we're going to return a list of something, right? So let's do return. So now we need to actually have a model for our video. So let's go back up here to lib, and I'm going to say new folder and call this model. So for this, I want to make this pretty simple. I'm going to create a video.dart, and then say class video, and say final string name. So we're going to pass in a name and pass in a description. Let's call it DESC. Create a constructor to pass that data in. So video, this dot name, and this dot DSC. Let's just call it description so it's not confusing to anyone. Description. Okay, and that's all we're going to do for now. I know there's ways to make this more efficient, but we're going to come back to that later when we actually start working with the APIs. So for now, we're just going to keep this as it is. And now let's go back to the repository. And now I'm going to create a list of videos. So let's go down here and let's say video 1, and let's do DSC here, or DESC here, 1. Okay, and we need to import that. So let's do import. And now let's create some more of these here. So so we have 6 here. So let's do 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so now we should tell this function what to return. So you can see here, it should have a return type. So let's add return type. And now we have a feature list of videos. And that's all I'm going to do for this repository. We can always add more functions later, but for now, let's keep it simple. So now looking back here in Chrome, we actually have these 2 layers done already. So now let's work our way backwards. I'm going to create a doc comment here for a reference. So this is, let's call it a useful, this is kind of like an abstraction layer. So a useful abstraction layer between services and data. So not all apps have this layer, but I think it's pretty handy. Even for small apps, you might want this because as your app grows, you might have different places where you want to get the same types of data, and you kind of have to decide where to get that data from. And this is a good layer to have that kind of choice built into it. Okay, so let's go back to the lib, and I'm gonna say new folder, service, and say new file, and this is going to be a video service.dart. And now we can say class video service. Okay, so now the only thing that a service can access based on our design is the repository. Okay, so let's go down here, and now I'm going to create a new repository. So let's say final video repository. And then let's do underscore video repository equals video repository. Okay, pretty simple, right? So let's go down here now. And now I want to create a function that returns the same type as our repository. So that's future list video. And then let's call the function fetch videos. And now I'm just going to call that repository function. So let's return video repository dot fetch all videos. Now we need to import this too. So you might be asking, why would we create the repository layer, and this layer. So with this type of function here, in a normal app, you might do some kind of like business logic to determine how the videos are returned to your controllers. But for now, all we're going to do is just fetch all the videos here. It looks meaningless for now, but when we actually build out the app more, you'll see why these layers are so important. Okay? So this is our service layer. So let's go back up to the... Oh yeah, we need to create that first. So let's go up here to lib, and I want to create a new folder, and I like to call it controller. You can call it whatever you want. Some people call it state. I like the word controller. So we have our controller, right? So back in the diagram, our controller is normally some kind of state management solution here. So I'm going to use provider because provider is probably the more popular one for now. So let's go back to the app, and I've already imported provider in the pub spec here. So you see provider 6.0.0 or 6.0.1 here. So let's go back to the controller. And if you're familiar with provider, you know that you might want to use a change notifier to control your state. So let's go to the controller class here, or controller folder, create new file, and this is going to be called video notifier dot dart. And inside of here, say class video notifier extends change notifier. And if you're not familiar with provider, I did a video on it. Actually, I did a video on provider 3 and provider 5 too, I think. So I will put the link in the description of the video, and it should be at the top of the screen now too. So this is not a video on how to use provider, so I'm going to assume that you already know how to use it, or you want to learn how to use it from the other videos. So up here, I want to create a list of videos that are stored in this change notifier. So I want the UI to be aware of when the video list changes. So up here, I'm going to say list video, and then do underscore video list, and create an empty array of videos to start. Okay, and we need to import our video. And now I want to create a getter for that video list. So I want to say, let's do it up here. List video. And now this is going to be a getter. So say get video list with no underscore, return the underscore video list. So the goal with all this is to make stuff very modular. So like I know exactly what layers could access the other layers. Okay, so down here in our diagram here, so the only thing that can access the services are the controllers. So the controllers access the services. Okay. So now down here, I can add a new instance of the video service. So I want to say final video service underscore video service equals video service. So you can kind of see now how things are being structured. Each layer can only access the layer below it. Okay, so now I want to create a function to fetch the videos as we have done in the other layers too. So down here, I'm going to say fetch, and this will actually be void. So let's say void fetch videos, and we're going to say video list equals, we should await this because it's a future. So let's say await video service dot fetch videos. Okay, and this should be a sync here. And now if you are familiar with provider, then you know that we should add the line notify listeners. That will notify our UI if it's listening for a change on that variable. It will listen for that. and update. Okay. So that is all I want to do for the video notifier for now. So let's go back to our diagram. So we have the controller with our state here. The state inside of that controller is decided based on a method that it calls in our services. The services call the repository, which decides where the data should be coming from and gets that data from that location, whether it's a database, API, file storage, etc. And for this video, we are not implementing our data source yet, but we're just putting some dummy data in the repository here. Okay, so for now, it's basically these three. Let's go back to the app, and we need to finish setting up our provider for our app. So now go back to the main, and this is what we had before in part 1. Now up here, I want to add our provider. So I'm going to say multi-provider. Then I'm going to add our providers here. So provider, providers. Okay, and let's import provider. And now this should be around this. Okay. And let's get rid of this here. Okay, and now we add our change notifier provider. So we do change notifier provider, and now we create our provider. Do underscore here, video notifier. Okay, and then we also need to tell it what the child is. So that's our Flutter factory app. So we do child, and boom. Okay, so that's the setup for our provider here. Now we should talk about how to actually call that function to fetch our videos. So what I like to do is I like to fetch stuff when the app first loads. So we have our Flutter factory widget here, right? So the first thing I want to do is I want to actually change this to a stateful widget. So I have a shortcut in VS Code here. I could say convert to stateful widget. So now I want to use our init function here. So, or init state. So I want to say init state. So this happens only one time during the lifetime of the Flutter app. So your first line of thought might be to use the provider to fetch the data like this. So you might want to do provider dot of, and then name your provider. So video notifier, do context here, like so. So you might think of doing this and then calling the fetch videos here. So let's see what happens when we try to do this. So let's rerun our app. And we get an error. So if you see this error, don't be too afraid. It's basically saying that you tried to reference the context before the widgets were built. So one thing that you can't do is reference the context in init state directly. And the same with the provider library too. So the way around this is to actually wrap this in something called an add PostFrame callback. So I'll write the code first and then I'll explain it. So down here, I'll say schedule binding dot instance, and then I want to say dot add PostFrame callback. And we get an error here because this is a nullable value here. So let's just put a question mark here. Okay. And instead of here, I want to put this line. So basically what this is saying is that wait for the UI to be built first for the app, for all this stuff here, and then call this after it's been built. So at that point in time, we would have a context to use for the app. Okay. So let's go back to the notifier real quick, and I want to do a print statement here. So I want to print the video list here. So let's print, and let's say video list dot length. So this is a test to print out the length to show that we are actually fetching our videos. Okay, so let's save and restart. And you see that we have another issue here too. So this is more of an issue with provider directly. And basically it's telling you that you need to add listen false to your provider and the main here. So when we invoke this provider, we can add a second variable here that is named listen. So we don't want the provider to be listening for changes. So we'll say false here. And again, if you don't know about provider, please look at my other videos that I did on using provider. I explain all the stuff in those videos. Okay. So we have listen false here. So now let's reload again. And we don't get that error here. And now let's wait for a bit. And now you see we have Flutter 6 here. So Flutter 6 is the length of our videos in the repository here. So we have 6 here. So if I add another one here and reload, you see that we have 7 here now. Okay, so that works. So we know that we're getting data from our repository sent back to our service and sent back to the video notifier here. Okay, so this lets the UI listen for the video lists. So now let's add a little bit of UI to add to this. So now just to actually connect our UI with the video notifier, let's add a bit of UI to show that we are updating the video list correctly. So let's go back to the home screen. So the first thing I want to do is I want to break up the containers here into actual widgets here, into actual like stateless widgets. So I'm going to create a new file here and call it video page.dart. And then I'm going to create a new file here and call it docs page.dart. Okay, and for now, for the docs page, let's just create a stateless widget and call it docs page. And I'm going to do the same thing that I did on the home screen, and I'm going to just return a container with color red. Okay, keeping it pretty simple for that tab. So for the video tab, let's go back here. Let's do something similar. Let's do stateless widget, video page, import material here. And now for this one, I want to make the color will be the same. Colors dot purple. Let's do deep purple. Okay, but instead of here, I want to put a child now. So let's do child. And I'm just going to create a big text widget that has the number of videos. So for this, I'm going to say, first let's do a center. So centered, center, and child, and then do text. And for the text, I'm going to say the word video. So let's do videos. And for this string here, we're going to get this data from the provider. So I'm going to say context dot watch. So again, if you're not familiar with provider, please go look at my videos. Context dot watch, and then I'm going to use that video notifier here. So video notifier, and we need to import our provider too. So let's go back to the notifier. Actually, in the main here, copy this and put it into the page. Okay, So video notifier, let's import that too. And now since we have access to our video notifier, we can get our getter, or we can access our getter, and we can say dot video list. And now I want to say dot length. So I hope that wasn't too confusing. This should be in brackets. There we go. So again, I'm assuming that you already know about provider. Let's put this here too. There we go. So I'm going to print out the videos. Let's do videos. Videos and the length of the video list. Okay, down here, let's add some styling. Let's do style, and then I'm going to add some white text here. So let's do text style, and we can do color. And for the color, let's do colors dot white. Okay, and let's make it a pretty big font size. So let's do font size. Let's make it, I don't know, 42. Let's do 48 actually. 48 here. Okay, what am I seeing here? Oh yeah. So this should be actually inside of here. So there we go. Okay, so now I think that's everything that I want to do for now. So let's reload. Oh yeah, so I need to go back to the home page, and we need to actually add our new views here. So up here, instead of these, we'll have video page, and up here we'll have docs page, and import this. Okay, now we should see our video page here. So restart. Now you see video 0. And now you see video 6. So we waited 5 seconds and we updated the list here, or the length here, based on the change in the video notifier. And using our provider, we can access that data in the UI. And to make this look a little bit better, let's add a colon here. Okay, so I hope this actually helps you design your apps a little bit better. This is a very, very, very important step to making this entire app. And without it, the code would be very confusing to people that are new to programming in general. But I wanted to keep it as simple as possible with separate layers. So the UI can access the controllers. The controllers can access the services. So we have our service here. So we do video service.fetch videos. So never access the data directly from your notifiers here. Okay, only the service. And our service can access the repositories. So any like transformations on the data that you want to do, you can do it here too. So like here we could say do some operations on the data before returning if needed. Okay, and that's where our business logic comes into play here. But for this video, we're not going to worry about any business logic quite yet. So in our service, we access the repository to fetch our videos. Okay, and our videos for this video are just a dummy list of video objects here. Okay, later on, we're going to actually have some stuff here that determines whether our videos are coming from like a database or an API, etc. But for now, we just have this list here. Okay, so yeah, that's all I want to talk about. Again, this is a very, very important topic. If you're trying to move up as a junior developer to a senior developer, you really need to understand architecture and be able to separate out your code into different layers too. Okay, So yeah, I hope that helps you out, and stay tuned for part 3 coming up pretty soon. I will try to get that up within a few days. So yeah, stay tuned for the next video, and happy coding. Bye.